let's talk about Glenn Stubbins. I thought it was just such a nice way to bring Paul Rudd back into the show.
It also felt like a Paul Ruddier role. Let's chat about the Westies
And their scheme.
and their scheme. What do you think about this?
I don't believe it still. I mean, I do and I don't. I feel like they're too likable to be the killers.
Do you think it's the brother sister still?
Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Sterling and I are talking about the hit Hulu series Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 4, so spoilers are ahead. And if you're enjoying this content, a like would be appreciated. And if you don't want to miss any of the content in your feed, just hit that subscribe button and turn on that bell for notifications. And with that, Sterling, let's talk about Glenn Stubbins.
You know what? I was so happy to see Paul Rudd, and I feel like that's like playing with our expectations. Like the first thing is like, how is he here?
Right. I thought so too. Like when I first see him, I'm like, oh man, it is like just like the trio's first reactions. It's Ben Gilroy.
Right. Yep.
And I thought it was just such a nice way to bring Paul Rudd back into the show and not make it feel like it's, oh, we bought Ben Gilroy back. It's his stunt double. Like everybody in the business has the guy that would take the fall for him. And Glenn Stubbins was his guy. And I loved his accent, his narration. He was great.
It also felt like a Paul Ruddier role. Like this was definitely more likable, funnier. He could really kind of sink his teeth into this one and have some fun with it. Because I feel like most of his characters are extremely likable, and obviously the last character was on the unlikable side.
Right. Like, I think it's displayed really well in the last season. Him and Charles didn't get along, and then in this season, it does seem like Charles and Glenn Stubbins could be friends in this world. He might be his new stunt double.
Right. I don't think we're necessarily going to get a ton of him, but it does open up a way for us to get a little bit more of him in the show. I did like the use of stunt men in this episode. Like it definitely felt like it had, once again, we've talked about like the show has love for the types of media that it uses, and I feel like it was focusing on the stunt people and really showing love for them. In particular, I really liked the scene where Glenn Stubbins is showing off how good of a stuntman he is. I love that it definitely used a stuntman in it. Every single time that it would like cut or he'd go out of frame and then somebody else would enter frame, it's always like back to the camera, like that's the stunt person. And it gave them, I don't think that this show gets a lot of opportunities to use stuntmen. And so I think this was like an excuse to celebrate them and get them into the episode.
Yeah, no, and I do love that about like shows. You can, if you're an eagle-eyed viewer or you know anything about how movies are made, you can be like, oh, that's a stunt person that they switch in. But, to the average viewer, they watch it. They probably thought that was Paul Rudd doing all of those little bits. But us, we know that they are switching out stuntmen. And it was very obvious. Like, he runs off frame, jumps on the car. And like you were saying, every time there was a perfect cut to show that it was somebody else, and then Paul Rudd pops up every time.
Right. Yep. I feel like it was definitely like a wink and a nod. Like they weren't trying to do it poorly, but they also weren't trying to work super hard to like cover it up so nobody could tell. Like they were, to a certain extent, they were showing it without making it look bad, so that they could kind of celebrate the stunt people.
It definitely reminds me, there's, of course, naming after movies, the episodes.
Yes.
There is a movie called The Stunt Man, which is...
I wondered about that, because I'd never heard of it. When I heard that title, I was like, oh, have they moved away from that?
And no, they actually did. And it also reminds me of a movie that just recently came out called The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, all about a stunt man. And I feel like in this episode, it's very, like, poignant about the stuntman is always a faceless person and they just have a face, and then in this bar there's an acting double. Like it's not the stuntmen are the celebrated people and the actors are the people that are just standing in place for the stuntmen. And I think that this was a nice appreciation for the work that stuntmen do in the business.
Absolutely. And they don't get enough love in the business, and they have a very difficult job, and sometimes there's even deaths occasionally
Yeah.
from it. Like it is dangerous work, even if you don't necessarily, even if it's not quite that bad, the injury that comes from it, like they're kind of showing that. I think this really kind of took a group of people that normally don't get a lot of recognition, and really kind of, this was like a thank you for everything you do. You're number one in our eyes.
Yeah. And I think they really celebrated that with the funeral where they all started fighting, where it was just a bunch of stuntmen fighting. Like,
Right.
I thought that was so clever. It was so great so that we could just like take a peek into the lives of stuntmen and on their time
Yes.
off, they're just beating each other up with breakaway chairs, breakaway bottles.
Right. I love how quickly that fight went from somebody offended that, you know, Glenn did. That's probably like a sin in the stunt world, is like accidentally having a real prop where it should be like a breakaway. Like safety is extremely important in that kind of field of work. How quickly it went from kind of real anger to just like a silly stunt brawl. How quickly they got excited when he like threw the pool cues, which is
Yeah.
like, that's such a classic bar stuntman prop, is the pool cue. Like you really get the satisfaction of like smashing that across somebody and seeing like the wood splinter. Um
Hmm.
so once again, like it really felt like it was celebrating classic stunt scenes.
Yeah.
I do feel like stunt people are getting a little bit more recognition. Like there are some people that have like the one stunt person across all their films, and they'll include them, on their Instagram pages occasionally. Like a picture, I think, who is Chris Hemsworth is one that I've
Mm.
seen. And that dude has a tough job for a couple of reasons. One, he actually struggles to have the same size frame as Chris Hemsworth. Apparently Chris Hemsworth like just has a huge frame.
Yeah.
And then I think like with the John Wick movies, I think that has, I feel like that studio sprang up from people doing stunt work that wanted to take it to the top end, and like have that be an art form and something where it's an integral part of the movie, where you spend a ton of time with like choreography with the main actors, so that you don't have to always switch them out, one, and then two, so that like when you do have to do those cutaway shots, they're like few and far between, so it's not quite as obvious. So I do think there is like more love for them.
Yeah. And I think someone that really pioneered that was Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan was this auteur who just wanted to make movies where he was doing all these stunts. He is doing all of his stunts. Like he never had a stunt man. And I know it took a huge toll on his body. Like we saw in this episode that there's this magical chiropractor that is, fixing these broken stuntmen and how the stuntmen won't tell their face that they're actually in pain and feeling all these bruises from all their falls and whatnot.
Right. I also loved like the fact that Glenn was Irish. I loved the use of feck. I know it's somewhere in between something completely harmless like flip, and something that is explicitly banned by the MPAA in most movies, like fuck. So it's somewhere in between, but it still has that same kind of usage. To me, it doesn't hit like when somebody's like, oh, frick or flip or something. Like it feels much closer to an actual expletive. And he was really hamming it up and throwing it in, like fecking feckers, you know.
Go feck yourself, you took it from me. Yeah, it was classic, classic Paul Rudd. So good.
Awesome. Let's chat about the Westies.
And their scheme.
And their scheme. What do you think about this?
I don't believe it still. I still,
Okay.
I mean, I do and I don't. I'm
Okay.
like,
Okay. Okay.
I feel, okay, to me, it feels like it's still part with Sazz. Like, I still feel like
Okay.
Sazz is involved. And possibly
I
Sazz,
don't feel that.
you don't feel that.
But let's
Interesting.
continue. Let's
Okay,
discuss the different
okay.
sides.
Why I believe this still.
Yes.
Okay, we talked about in a lot in this episode was the idea of Sazz retiring and leaving stunt work behind, which
Yep.
is kind of frowned upon by the stuntman community, starting her own dream of opening up these trampoline parks where the next generation of stuntmen can be trained. So, Dudenoff is somebody that's retired in Portugal, which also could be Sazz retiring in Portugal, starting a stunt business over across the pond.
Okay. Okay.
These are a lot. And then the one thing that
The
made me
Dudenoff thing did seem like that's been going on for a long time. Not to say that she couldn't have been involved in this for a long time,
but
but
how
it's
long
because
has Charles lived in that apartment?
I don't know.
A long time, I
Hmm.
feel. And
Okay.
Sazz has
Okay.
always been around.
Okay.
So I also Vince got really like defensive about when she said that you murdered Sazz. Vince, how would Vince really know who Sazz is? And she's like, I don't even know who Sazz is. And he seemed very, I don't know, seemed like he might know something. And Dudenoff just seems like a very fake name.
Okay. Okay.
So that's why I'm still on the it is Sazz.
Okay. Okay. So here's my take on this. So Christmas Guy's girlfriend is Helga. That's the crazy ex,
Yeah.
right? Helga was one of the names written on Sazz's notes.
Okay.
So Sazz knows about Helga. Sazz potentially has maybe contacted Helga or staked out Helga, something along those lines. We're told that she's crazy, and Rudy even had to show the group that he blocked her on his cell, which I think you can take that one of two ways. Like, you can take that as we as a group of the Westies are all trying to help you move on from this crazy person. And because you struggle to do it yourself, like, we want you to take the step and we want you to show us that you took the step. That's, I think, the way that they tried to show it. But the other way I can take that is, what if, well, let me continue and then I'll get to the other way I could possibly see that. So then they also say that she's been trying to contact Christmas Guy on the ham radio since she's been blocked. Which, once again, that leans into like the craziness, or there could be another aspect, which we'll get to in just a moment. And then this was the thing that really hit me, was when Vince Fish said, "Look, we're just a family of weirdos here. Helga was the wrong kind of weirdo." There's something kind of sinister about weird people understanding what it's like to be pushed away from others, that also then label other people as weird and further push them away. I know it happens, but there's something about that, and the way that I kind of put all these pieces together in my head was, I think somebody, like maybe Vince, I think Helga maybe knows something, maybe about like the cold case that she shouldn't know. Vince is worried about her spreading this information to everybody else, and so he gets everybody on board with like, she's crazy, don't contact her, let's push her out. And I think that's kind of the read I got on it. So I wonder if she knows something and Vince doesn't want the others to know. And I wonder if Sazz has contacted her and maybe Sazz knows that from Helga. So I think Helga's the person in the picture with the pig.
Oh, you think that's Helga?
I do think that now.
Then why would Helga be in the Dudenoff apartment? See, it doesn't seem like, here's the thing.
I think they're all the Dudenoff place.
But the pig that Helga was holding was in the actual Dudenoff place. So, to me, also, Helga is in Iceland.
She's from Finland.
From Finland. Right,
We
because the
don't know if
hammer.
she is there.
Right, right. Well, because no, because he said that Christmas tree guy said that it's very dark there, that she gets kind of in her head. So I did take it that she was there, but also how would the ham radio pick up that far? So maybe
Yeah.
not.
I
I
think he was saying like from that she picked up this weirdness because of the time she had spent there.
That's potential. I do also think partially with what Mabel said in the beginning of the episode that Sazz is still alive because to freshen up the podcast,
Okay.
we're searching for the body. That's what or she said we're searching for not just the killer, but the victim as well.
The other thing that Mabel said from episode 1, which really hit with me thinking that Vince is maybe the person who was part of this, was, so let's just say that like some crime had been committed and one of them knew about it, and maybe I think Helga maybe like fled in order to protect herself, and then I think Vince potentially covered up her leaving and didn't want the others to contact her so that they couldn't find the information. So she's potentially hiding, is my opinion. He's preventing them from contacting her by, making everybody believe that she's kind of crazy. But I think the motivation in this case would be when Mabel said, "I'd kill to be able to afford rent." And I think that if anything, like any kind of crime comes up and the police investigate, they'll very quickly figure out that these people are here illegally, that like they shouldn't be subletting, and everybody's place goes up and they all lose their place. And I think somebody is potentially willing to kill to be able to afford rent.
Yeah, I don't know if I follow that because if I look at like only murders in the building as a whole, and I look at like Mabel's place in the Arconia, this seems like she's basically for a whole season before this was having a hard time finding a place to live. And
Right.
this seems to fix that problem of like her coming back to the Arconia affordably. And so to me,
The
this
movie
does
deal might fix that.
the movie deal could fix that, but now we see that Molly Shannon's character has a gun. So how stable is this actually, this
Right.
movie? I don't know. I still I think it would be hard to saddle a lot of baggage onto Helga because we are in episode 4. We got
Mm-hmm.
one call from her on a ham radio. Unless Helga is somebody that we've already met. I
Well, no,
feel
I'm not. I'm saying Vince is the. I think Vince is
the
the
killer.
killer. Yes,
I
I think
don't
Vince
think
is the
it's
killer, and I
Vince.
think that Helga is hiding because
I
she found something out.
I don't the only I okay, I don't think it's Vince because the Westies do seem very close.
Yeah.
And I could also yeah, you're right, Vince could do that. We didn't see Vince until I think it was episode 2, 3, 2, must have been 2. So, I just maybe it's Vince, but I just don't think he has enough motivation to do it.
Got it.
But I don't know.
We'll
Maybe I
see.
mean you're right. You're the scheme, but like you said, like if this fixes Mabel's problem and Vince is the person, then everybody's gonna lose from this
Right.
Dudenoff plan. So
Exactly. Any investigation that comes in, they all lose, and I think one of them could be desperate enough.
well, that's I mean they
We'll.
could be, but they do seem so close. They seem so close, and their card game and the card game with Sazz getting the card game together. I still feel like Sazz is their friend. I feel like they're too likable to be the killers.
Okay. Okay. I get that. I get that. We'll
But
see.
we don't know this.
So then,
And
so
this
then,
is
are you still in the camp of that? It's like do you think it's the brother and sister still? Something along those lines.
okay with Molly Shannon being at Sazz's trampoline park. that does kind of bring a connection to the brothers sisters in a way.
What's the connection with the brothers sisters on the
Well,
trampoline
Molly,
park?
it does seem like, okay, so Molly Shannon's character, who is putting this movie together, is working
Yeah.
closely with the brothers sisters.
Yes.
Like we saw them, all three were sitting on the couch as they watched Howard try out for the role of Howard.
Yep.
And so we see her at the trampoline park, like they work closely together.
Yeah.
Maybe the brothers sisters sent her there for X amount of reasons. So like I do think there is a connection to the brother sister, but I also, after watching them in this episode, getting a little bit more, I don't know. Scott Bakula. Still Scott Bakula.
Still Scott Bakula. I love it. I don't quite feel like we've seen enough of it for, like, he literally was just like a cameo in the first episode.
True.
So unless they bring him in more, I don't think it's going to be him.
So, okay, we're episode 4, and thinking of, like, the characters that we've seen, do we think we've seen the killer? Like, if it, you think it's possibly
I think it's
Vince
Fish. Yeah.
And I think it's possibly, I am leaning more towards the brothers sisters.
Okay,
but...
so I know that I pushed the brothers sisters early, and I know part of it is like when I get something, I latch onto it sometimes a little too long, and I think I might have latched on to something wrong, and that's the golf game.
Right.
5.5
lesbian brothers.
Was it lesbian? It wasn't worded the same way that they're worded. Because,
right.
They're the brothers sisters. That's what it is.
Right.
They're the brothers sisters. The game is the 5.5 lesbian brothers.
Yeah.
And when I don't remember what I was looking up, but I was trying to. I was looking that ticket up to see if I could find like a picture of it. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a group called the 5 Lesbian Brothers.
Hmm.
I don't remember exactly. They're people that are in, I think, theater or something like that. So this might have been an homage to something real more than it was a clue, which is what I thought it was.
I mean, I still think it has to be a clue because, this is Sazz's desk. This was like, we got the oh hell from there.
Right.
We got the code for the Dudenoff apartment. So I don't know, they're just, how did she get that code? How did Sazz know that
I think
code?
From Helga.
So you think Helga, who may have not even lived in the Arconia, had the code to the Dudenoff apartment?
Because she might have been tight with all of them, and then got pushed out when she discovered something, tried to hide to protect herself, and Vince wanted to protect himself by getting everybody to not contact her and saying it's for the good of Christmas Guy. Like, look, your ex is crazy. You shouldn't be talking to her. None of us should be talking to her. She's crazy. That's not good for us.
I don't know, because it does seem like even the Sauce people are very anti-Helga. And it could be Vince. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I don't know. I feel like Helga is too far removed, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
And they seemed cult-like, and somebody made the joke of they seem cult-like, and he's like, yeah, well, when you put it that way, it does seem like it. But I did try and get, what was it, like matching pajamas or something like that? Bathrobes. And that was Vince, wasn't it?
That was Vince. But bathrobes is so harmless.
I think he's potential, like, I think he's the one that is like ringleading these like group dynamics of like, let's play this game, let's do this stuff, let's all be a tight group of weirdos wearing bathrobes, and then all of a sudden somebody's too weird for the weirdos and they get pushed out.
Well, I could also see that because the Dudenoff scheme of, him living in Portugal, a rent control scheme, like, it did seem like that could have a little bit of false truths in there, and it does, and potentially the story they made up about Helga and her there, like, they could all be on the same page, and Helga is a different person that's not really Christmas Guy's boyfriend, but Helga could be somebody, something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Couple of other kind of random stuff when Charles is getting worked.
Hmm.
He mentions Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, and even if you don't know Edward Hopper off the top of your head, everybody's seen Nighthawks. It's an extremely famous painting. I think in like New York at nighttime at a diner. I've seen an Edward Hopper exhibit, and for me, his stuff hits perfectly for this show because there's a certain level of like voyeurism to what he does, where he catches people in these awkward moments or in an awkward way where it would kind of like uncomfortable moments, moments of like tension or silence versus necessarily kind of those like in between moments, which I think kind of is like the group is, not perfect people, that like have their foibles, have their issues with each other. You've got like these weirdos next door, you've got an element of like voyeurism, where they literally are watching, trying to catch certain things. So I liked that inclusion.
Hmm.
And I don't know why I only recently noticed it, but completely unrelated to that. I really like the set and costume design on this show. Like it is bright and vibrant, and I think it lets you know that like you're about to have some fun, you know?
Yeah, I really love, Oliver Putnam's outfits that he's had since the beginning. But the dynamic of, Charles even said it in this episode where he has this signature look, and it's funny because we see him, we see Sazz dressed like it, we saw Bakula dressed like it,
Yes.
but it's like this very, coat, fedora,
Yep.
big glasses, and it kind of is signature. Like it for something so ordinary, it's Charles
Right.
Hayden Savage.
I love how out of touch they are. Like when they go into the stuntman bar and Charles starts off in the right direction of ordering something simple and then very quickly goes the wrong way of like anything from like 2011, And this
Right.
is like an everyman's bar. It's not your fancy frou-frou, and then he's like, or anything from like France.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved all the old people jokes with like the iPad because that,
Mm.
man, like I feel like they are able to make jokes like that because one, their people are on the older side, and even when it's coming from Mabel, it's like she's an old soul, so it's still coming from a place, and she loves them,
Yeah.
so it's still coming from a place of love. Like that's, I think their jokes never come off as mean because I think anytime they do jokes, they're always coming from a place of love versus a place of like pointing and laughing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's the better way to do comedy is to not poke down and punch down at people, but
Yes.
to like punch across, but like not really punching. It's just like pointing out a bit of the absurdity and, like you said, with love.
Yes, exactly.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along. Come back next week as we tackle Only Murders in the Building, Episode 5. We look forward to seeing you then. But until next time, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.